All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Financial Fridays with SAANYS and Equitable. Today's topic is Summer Financial Strategies 101. SAANYS is excited to offer these sessions in cooperation with our corporate partner, Equitable Advisors. Equitable has a long-standing presence in New York, and a large portion of their New York client base is based upon the work they do within the public education system. Through Equitable, SANYS members can receive competitive insurance rates and a full array of retirement services, including a complimentary financial profile as a SANYS members, which we urge you to take advantage of. It's a great benefit, a part of your membership. Joining us today from Equitable is Emmy. We'll save some questions until the end of the presentation, but feel free to add your questions in the chat below at any time, and then we'll go over them at the end of the presentation. Our Q&A time is best used for general questions, but please know that the Equitable team is available at any time to answer your personal and confidential questions. You'll find contact information also for Emmy and other regional Equitable representatives on saneys.org, and I will turn it over to Emmy.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I am so happy to be here today. One of my favorite parts of my job is always working with educators. I'm going to share my screen. And Lachey, if you could just let me know when you can see it, and we will get started talking a bit about Financial Strategies 101.
Sure thing. You're all set.
Okay, wonderful. So today our topic of conversation is Financial Strategies 101, making the most of your money. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation, I do need to show you this disclosure. This is saying that today's presentation is not meant to be tax or legal advice. It is educational and general in nature. Everyone's situation is unique, so if you have specific questions about your situation, please feel free to put time on my calendar. I'm always happy to discuss one-on-one with someone to make sure that we are giving the best, most suitable advice to an individual. Throughout the presentation, you'll see a QR code that links to my calendar in the upper right-hand corner of most of the slides, so feel free to use that to put time on my calendar. Today's agenda. The first thing we want to talk about is the advantages of smart financial management. Then we're going to get into overcoming obstacles, financial management components, and then how do we get started? Because often we have all these grand ideas in our head, but if we don't know where the starting place is, it can be very difficult to initiate any type of effective change. So, smart financial management advantages. A financial program is simply a map or a game plan. It is the process of prioritizing the allocation of cash resources to help you achieve goals and dreams in the future. And managing your finances begins as early as your first paycheck. You'll often notice that money is automatically withheld or deducted to pay federal and state taxes, as well as for Social Security and Medicare. But from whatever is left over, it's your job to properly allocate to cover expenses such as mortgage, groceries, and other bills. And then, of course, we want to live our lives. We want to make sure that we can entertain ourselves, get gifts for others, go out to dinner from time to time. But then what? We need to ask ourselves, what are we doing for our future? Do we know how we are going to afford a child's education, how we're going to afford retirement, how we're going to move into that next house that isn't our starter house, or go on that dream vacation? And smart financial management really starts with having clear goals in mind. And over time, your goals might change, but we want to make sure that we have a sensible program and workable goals to help you make the most of your money. Because the reality is, you work hard for your money, and we don't want a disorganized plan. Because otherwise, we're going to run into a lot of obstacles for financial success. And the biggest obstacles that I see as a financial advisor is first expectations, but no plan. One of my favorite clients, she's one of the best people on earth, has a lot of expectations for her future. And she started saving young because her father was like, you need to save into your 403B. But her plan was very much a mess when I met her. There was no plan when I met her. The only thing she had was 30 years of something that she forgot that she was saving into. So her retirement picture and all the dreams she had was a bit discombobulated. But by creating a plan for her, all of a sudden, all that saving she had done in the future, all the hard work that she had put into her career, she now could succeed in retirement because she had a plan. The other obstacle to financial success that I see with a lot of people is what we call here the kiss of debt. And we're not talking about low interest debt, such as a mortgage or certain student loans. Typically, it's credit card debt. So, with credit card debt, we have high interest payments, and we don't want to accumulate this consumer debt over time. We want to always have debt pay down strategies, and that really comes back to budgeting and planning. The third thing that I always talk to people about is inflation. And we really focus on inflation with educators who have New York State pensions, because I'm not sure who on here is aware, but your New York State pension, although it is the most stable pension system in the United States, does not keep up with inflation. So, what you get during year one of retirement is essentially what you get during year 30 of retirement. And we know that over time, the cost of goods and services is going to go up. So, when it comes to the obstacle of inflation, I always tell a story about my parents. So, back in the 1980s, when they were young and married, they were completely broke. They didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. They were both working two full time jobs, and each of them had a part time job. They didn't have two pennies to rub together. And then my father got a bonus one year, and he knew that my mother's favorite holiday was Christmas. And they didn't have a tree topper for their tree because they could never afford it before. So he went out and he bought a fancy tree topper to surprise her, and he spent $40 on that tree topper. And when he told my grandmother, his mother, that he had bought my mom a $40 tree topper, he said she was not a violent woman, but he thought she was going to slap him. And I never really understood that story as a child and as a teenager because I was like, it was $40 and you got a bonus, and mom likes Christmas. But after I got this job and I started seeing the effect of inflation on people's financial plans, I looked up how much today $40 would buy. And $40 back in the early 1980s is the equivalent of spending around $160 today. So we just want to keep in mind as we're doing a financial plan that inflation is very, very real, and it's going to be one of the biggest concerns that you'll have as a New York State pensioned employee, simply because your pension does not keep pace with inflation. And then the fourth obstacle I see to financial success is procrastination. The reality is there's always going to be stuff going on in our lives. But if we make small actionable changes today, then the us 10 years from now will very much thank us. And I want to talk a little bit more about procrastination and the concept of the time value of money. So I'm not sure who here has heard of the time value of money before, but it's the idea that time invested in the market is more important than timing the market. So, in this hypothetical scenario, we have a 25-year-old who is contributing $189 a month to their retirement account. And this retirement account is then going to grow all the way up until they are 65 years old. And during the time that they are saving over those 40 years, they contribute a total of $90,905 to the retirement account. But it grows over those 40 years. So the day they go to retire, their account is worth 500,000. When it comes to procrastination, sometimes we have people who don't start saving until they're a bit older. So we have someone who's 50 who now is doing a higher monthly contribution into an account. And their contribution is $1,568. And over 15 years, they save $282,000. And they have that same $500,000 then when they go to retire. But we can see where the 25-year-old only contributed 90,000 over 40 years, the 50-year-old had to contribute much more. Now, that's not to say that if you're a little bit older, you shouldn't be saving. Nobody ever got to retirement and was like, "Oof, I wish I had saved for less money." But it is to say that a little bit now can go a long way later. And if you want to talk about how much you should be saving, depending on what's going on in your life or what you want in the future, please feel free to put time on my calendar. I feel like people get lost and they don't know who to reach out to, but you do have resources and we do want you to feel taken care of. So now we need to ask ourselves, how do we get started? We want to talk a bit about budgeting. Budgeting is the base of where we start. Is more coming into the household than is going out? Or is it the opposite, where you are running at a deficit every month, where you're spending more than you're taking in? And a budget can help us determine what your spending habits are like, what is a need, what is a want, and what we need to do in order to create an effective budgeting strategy. We also want to make sure that everyone has a retirement plan. There are very few things that are important for every single person on earth, but having a retirement savings plan is important for everyone because I hope that none of us have to work until we are 90. Now, some people want to work until they're 90, and that's fine, and that's a different story, but we still want the option to retire while we still have life to enjoy. You also need to look at your investments. It's all fine and dandy if someone's a great saver, but if they only ever save into cash, then they're not going to see growth over the long term. We're going to talk in more detail on a later slide about insurance and risk management because this is something that people don't often think about. It's not really fun to think about, but it's very important when we are starting to create a comprehensive financial plan. We also want to look at taxes. Are we being efficient with how we are saving and how we are paying taxes? There's something called tax drag, which we will also talk about later in the seminar. And then lastly, do you have an estate plan? Everybody needs some kind of estate plan, and sometimes the plan is simple and sometimes it is complex. But what we don't want to do is leave it up to the government to figure out what to do with our assets after we pass away. So, a good place to get started is by asking yourselves, what are my short term, midterm, and long term goals? Short term would be emergency reserves. So, think money that we have in the bank today. It's also our life and disability insurance. Are we properly protected if something was to happen to us? Ongoing goals can be things such as purchasing a house or sending a child off to college. And then longer term goals would be retirement and long term care. Every single person should have short term, midterm, and long term financial goals. And your goals might not be exactly the same as your neighbor's goals. But if we're not planning and saving for all three, then our plan starts to feel disjointed. And this is where people start to feel uncomfortable as changes happen over the years. If we know, hey, I need this much money in the bank today in order to feel stable, and I need this much being put away for my different goals, then when things go wrong, it's easy to adjust. But when we don't have those clear short term, midterm, and long term goals, that's where there's a lot of stress and where we start taking money from the wrong places or taking out the wrong types of debt in order to continue our lifestyle. I'm going to switch over to risk management. It's important to make sure you protect yourselves from risks that may derail you from achieving your goals along the way. So, risk management means protecting your finances against unexpected future events. In financial terms, this protection means insurance. So, the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, do we
Hi,
have the proper?
hi, Emmy. Sorry to interrupt. The slide was overlapping. Is it working on your end?
It looks fine on my end.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
It
not sure
just
what
it
you're
just went back.
seeing.
It went back to regular. Thank
Okay,
you.
wonderful. So the first thing we want to ask ourselves is, do we have the proper property and casualty insurance? We don't want to be driving around in a car that is uninsured. We don't want something to happen to our house, such as a fire, which I had at my house last year. My fiance was not being responsible with the grill. And we want to make sure that those assets, if something was to happen to them, are properly insured so we're not pulling money from other parts of our financial plan. Then we also have health insurance, which is always a hot topic conversation. The nice thing about being an employee of a school district is you typically have the best health insurance out there. And then we're going to talk today a bit about life, disability, and long term care insurance. So, life insurance comes into play if someone was to pass away, disability if someone was to become disabled, and long term care insurance is typically for our older years when maybe we need to be in assisted living or we need somebody to come to our home and start helping to take care of us. And you may have heard more about long term care insurance on the news lately than you have in the past. And that's because Albany is trying to pass a law right now requiring people to have it. It's still very up in the air, but I've gotten more and more questions about long term care insurance than I ever have in the past 6 months simply because of what is going on in Albany right now. So, life insurance. What happens if you were to pass away? New York State pensioned employees, their first year working for New York State, get 1 times their salary as a life insurance benefit. The second year, they get 2 times, and the third year, they get 3 times. And that life insurance payout is in lieu of your New York State pension. So if you were to pass away before collecting your pension would cease to exist, and your beneficiary would get that, say, 3 times your salary payout in a lump sum. The first $50,000 of that payout would be income tax free, and the remainder of it would be taxable. So, really, what we want to start having conversations around is, are we properly insured to make sure that all the bills can get paid if something was to happen to me or to perhaps my significant other? And also, am I protecting my New York State pension? Because your pension is going to be one of the most powerful things you will have during retirement. And typically, that payout, unless if your pension is very small, does not cover it over the long term. When it comes to disability insurance, usually we tell people you should be spending about 1% of your salary to protect around 80% of your income. Now, that's going to change from person to person depending on how much they have saved, as well as what the death looks like in their household. So, although I do always give the 1% to protect 80% shield on meetings like this, I would say don't go out and just buy disability insurance. That is definitely a one on one conversation because sometimes people need more and sometimes people need less. And then long term care insurance. How are we going to pay for the services that we need during our older years? All these different insurances can sometimes start to get a bit expensive for people. So, another important thing to talk about are insurance riders. Sometimes it is more suitable for people to take out a, say, life insurance policy with a long term care rider on it than it is to get standalone long term care insurance. It all depends on someone's cash flow, someone's wants, and someone's needs. And the insurance world can get very, very confusing over time. And honestly, if you take time to really study it, it is fascinating. But most people don't want to take a ton of time to study it. I'm just a bit of an insurance nerd. So it's definitely a one on one conversation. We don't want people going out and purchasing insurances that are not suitable for their needs. I'm going to transition from protections now to growing our wealth. So, investing for the future. Investing, in its true definition, means taking a measured degree of risk with money in pursuit of higher returns over a long period of time. And the word risk here means the level of volatility or uncertainty in how a particular investment will perform. So I'm going to talk about my parents again because they are always the best examples when it comes to risk tolerance. My mother is a very conservative person. She is terrified of the market. The only reason she has any investments is because I am licensed to coach her through investing. At one point in my life, I found $30,000 in that woman's closet. And I think everybody on this call knows that that is not where we keep our money. We want to make sure that our money is growing for us, but we can't be taking on too much risk where we're laying awake at night. If I took my mother's money and I put it all in Tesla stock or all in Nvidia stock, that wouldn't be suitable to her risk tolerance because she's a conservative individual when it comes to her money. Now, my father, on the other hand, seems to have an addiction to buying Microsoft stock, which, different conversation. He is more of a risk taker. So I am comfortable going out and purchasing investments for him at volatility in the short term. It's important for everyone on this call to start really asking themselves, how comfortable am I taking on a measured level of risk with my money? Because when it comes to those midterm goals, such as sending a child off to college, or those long term goals, such as retirement, we can't stay in this base of our pyramid. We can't stay super conservative. Otherwise, we'll never combat inflation. So, the base of this pyramid are more for our short term goals. These are the cash in the bank, the CDs, the money markets, the government bonds. But when we talk about retirement, purchasing a home down the road, we need our money to start working harder for us. So that's where maybe we look at mutual funds, larger mid cap stocks, or higher interest bonds. Now you'll see the summit of our risk reward pyramid are things like options, futures, and collectibles. Those are typically not suitable for the average investor. I think I have two clients that I am comfortable with them having options because it's very risky. But that middle section of the pyramid, it's important that we are exposing ourselves at least a little bit to investments so that we can get growth over a long period of time. So now we have to ask ourselves, how do we manage investment risks? The first is diversity. We don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. Don't be like my father and become addicted to just buying Microsoft stock, because then if Microsoft does poorly one year, your entire portfolio does poorly. And one thing that I always coach people through, and we can definitely talk about one-on-one, is what does proper diversity look like? Because it's not a diverse portfolio if we just went out and bought 5 stocks or one mutual fund. The next thing we need to talk about is asset allocation. So we need to build our portfolio with a variety of assets, and this is how we create proper diversity. And then dollar cost averaging. And this is why the 403B is the best thing in the world, because money comes out every single paycheck. So over time, we are automatically dollar cost averaging. And dollar cost averaging is the concept that if we consistently buy into the market at defined intervals, that sometimes we're going to buy the market at a high, but sometimes we're going to buy it at a low. And over the long term, we will have an average cost to our investments. Another thing to talk about is reducing tax liability. People get very excited about municipal bonds, tax deferred annuities, and their qualified retirement plans. And all of these types of investments are wonderful for the correct individual. It's definitely a one-on-one talk as to what is most suitable for you. But I'm going to shift in now to a little bit more detail on reducing your tax liability and talk about the power of tax deferral. So the graph in front of you is a little bit busy, but essentially what it's showing is that if we put money into a tax deferred account and invest that money, we will have more money in the long term than if we put that money into a taxable account. So here we have somebody who puts a single sum of $50,000 into an account and lets it accumulate for 30 years, and we're using a hypothetical rate of 8%. After 10 years, the taxable account, so the account where we have to worry about paying taxes on our interest and dividends each year, would be worth $87,535. But the tax deferred vehicle would be worth $107,950. This is the power of the 403b or the IRA, is that when money goes in, until we take money out, we don't need to worry about paying taxes on the money. So here we get into a deeper conversation about the taxation of retirement accounts. And there's two main ways that a retirement account is typically taxed. The first is a pre-tax account. With a pre-tax account, you get a tax deduction today. So if you're making $100,000 and you save $10,000 into your pre-tax account, you're only going to pay income tax on $90,000 that you made. Then the money is going to be invested tax deferred. But when you take the money out during retirement, that is when you pay your taxes. The reverse of that is a Roth. With a Roth, you pay your income tax today, so there is no tax deduction. The money goes into the account tax deferred. And then when you take money out during retirement, you don't owe taxes on that money because you paid them up front. Both of these accounts are awesome. They're both considered tax advantaged. Typically, when I talk to people about investing, there's a lot of red X's on the screen. These pre-tax and Roth retirement accounts will be your best way to combat inflation during retirement. Your New York State pension will be a relatively flat benefit, as will Social Security. But over time, because of inflation, retirement expenses will increase. And that's where, whether it's pre-tax or Roth, we start taking that money out so that we can supplement our lifestyle. And what I want to talk about now is just the impact of a little bit going a long way. So in this hypothetical example, someone is saving a $1,000 annual investment, but if they're getting a 5% rate of return, then after 10 years, that investment is worth $12,578. Even if you can only save a little bit today, take that little bit and put it to work for yourself in the future. Future you will thank you. And then our last subject today is estate planning. Now, there's really three different types of people I run into when it comes to estate planning. The first is the person that tells me I am going to spend every cent that I have ever made. I'm not leaving anything to my children. They will be fine. That person still needs an estate plan because if they do pass away, we don't want the government taking over what's going on. But they might have a simpler estate plan, just making sure beneficiaries are up to date and everything's in good order. The second type of person is the person that really wants to create generational wealth. And if you are the person that really wants to create generational wealth, then the best time to start planning for that was yesterday, and the second best time to start planning for that is today. Creating generational wealth, we need to look at taxes, appropriate pass down of assets, as well as who the money is going to and how we are coaching the person who is receiving the funds. And then the third type of person that I talk to looks at me and says, I don't know, what should I do? And if you're that person, that's okay as well. We can have a conversation about it. I do want to make a note that everyone on this call should probably have a will. Sometimes they're very simple and you can just do them online. Sometimes you have a more complicated situation and we need to refer you to a lawyer. But when it comes to estate planning, we just want to make sure that your hard-earned assets are being distributed in the way that you would prefer. Thank you all so much for listening to me talk today. I know sometimes I even get sick of the sound of my own voice, but as always, it is wonderful talking to educators. We are here to help. If you need help or you have questions, always feel free to reach out. All of my contact information is on the screen in front of you right now.
Thank you, Emmy. If there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If there's not any questions, again, you have her contact info, and this will also be on SAANY's YouTube channel and our SAANY's page. So if you want to go back and watch it, we'll have it on the website. But if there's no questions for Emmy, I'll probably give it a minute or two if there's any questions for her. Okay. So there is a
Would you like me
question.
to
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna
There's
say,
a
would you like me to
question.
stop sharing my screen? But what is the question?
It says, "What are the different types of life insurance?"
Um, that is a rabbit hole. Definitely put time on my calendar and I'll talk to you about it in more detail, but I'll give you the very basics of them. There's two main categories of life insurance. The first is term insurance, which is technically what that New York State pension insurance is. It's where it lasts for a certain term of time. So think 10, 15, 20 years. It is to protect us when we have mortgages and children, but it's essentially renting a policy. After that, say 10, 15-year term, it ceases to exist. The second main category of life insurance, and this is where we would have to get into what type is suitable for you, is permanent insurance. Permanent insurance, so long as it is well funded, lasts your entire life. But permanent insurance is a combination of protection, so the actual life insurance, as well as an investment, because there is a cash account inside of a permanent insurance policy. Actually, funny enough, funny story. My mother, when I was 1 month old, accidentally took out what was called a variable universal life insurance policy on me, and then she accidentally invested the cash account in the S&P 500. And now me, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but let's just say it's more than 30 years later, has the world's best permanent life insurance policy because my mother accidentally took that out on me. But yes, if you have questions about types of insurance, definitely put time on my calendar. Any other questions?
Thank you. It doesn't look like there's any other questions, so we can go ahead and end the live. Again, Emmy's contact information will be on a slide, and it will be posted on the YouTube channel and our SAANYS page. So if you want to have an appointment with her, make sure you definitely do for more information. And thank you for presenting, Emmy. It was good having you.
Thank you for having me. As always, lovely talking to you all.
Thanks. Bye bye.